What's going on, everybody? This is Chris Kay from the Burning the Red Shirt podcast here with Andrew Katz. Excited to talk a little bit championship weekend football, one of the better slates of the season. Talk a little bit about portal news, obviously, and a big surprise moment we're going to do this weekend. Andrew, I'll let you kick it off with what are we doing this weekend? What are we doing Sunday?
Dude, this is exciting. So we've gotten, I think it's not just from a single source. We've gotten feedback from multiple people in the past that our vibes, the way that we kind of run things when we pod is kind of akin to what you would expect if you tuned into a Twitter Spaces. And we're getting into Twitter Spaces season 2 right now, right? Where like you remember like that legendary Oregon one that went for like 3 days and people were just popping in when they were trying to figure out the next coach, right? So it is Twitter Spaces season, but we are going to host our first ever Twitter Spaces for Burning the Red Shirt Sunday night, thinking around 8 p.m. Bowl games announcements should be going on. It should be a fun climate, a fun atmosphere. If people want to just kind of pop in, and there'll be a zillion different things to talk about. If it ends up just being us, that's fine. I mean, I'm not starved for topics to talk about amongst you, me, and Zach. So that's straight. But I think it could be fun to just just talk about a bunch of different things with a bunch of different people and just kind of bounce off the ideas off each other and do some cool stuff until the night gets old. So it'll be fun.
Yeah, I think it should be fun. I think the bowl games, there's always like the fun bowl matchups you love, like when they announce it, like where the hell is that game being played again? So I think we'll have plenty of topics. And I think especially since the portal technically opens on Monday, right? Like, isn't that like the official day that people can start like officially committing to places, right?
That sounds right.
Sunday or Monday, one or the other, but we'll get a lot more action at that point. But I guess real quick, we don't usually like to talk too much about like the games ahead of us. I feel like our best stuff is just like the most random stuff, not necessarily like talk about this matchup, but like Saturday is supposed to be like this amazing weekend of games, and I think largely there are a bunch of games that are fun to watch and should be pretty cool. But does it lose its luster with basically 3 teams locked into the playoffs?
You think TCU's locked in?
I think so, yeah. Only because
the betting
LSU
markets
lost.
think so too. The betting markets think so too. I was shocked when I was like perusing FanDuel odds last night, and you can right now, one of the markets that you could bet is just yes or no, will this team make the playoffs? And I think the 2 teams they have are TCU and Alabama. Alabama is like basically 8-1 yes, or minus like 200 or 300 no. But they're not going to. The idea is they're not going to make it. But TCU is like the exact opposite. It's like plus or like minus like some 200 or something yes, and then like plus 800 no, or something crazy. Or
I just don't know.
I think I screw up the plus and minus horribly. But the sentiment is that if you were to bet no, you're getting like 8-1 on them not making it, which sounds outrageous to me. Like if they lose, I feel like the committee's gonna be like, let's go, let's kick this team out, let's bring in a team that appeals more to the masses, quote unquote, right? Like a bigger market type team. But what vibe are you getting, and what do you think actually happens there?
I think they're locked in. They've played too hard of a schedule. Like they haven't played like the most insane schedule.
Colorado really stuck out to you.
Well, better than a lot of the teams Michigan's played everybody else. So I don't know, when you're 12-0 and you win the Big 12, like that doesn't necessarily lock you in, but considering all the other teams, right? Like who is going to jump them, right? It would be Ohio State or LSU or Bama. Like LSU, if LSU wouldn't have lost last weekend, I think there's a real shot because then, right now LSU beats Georgia and they're still out. But last week, this time, they could have beaten Georgia and made it in as an 11-2 team. That's not the case anymore. So I just think the teams have fallen off, and thus they're just the last man standing in a sense.
You think that they'll put TCU in over Ohio State if TCU loses?
Yes.
How can you say that with a straight face?
Well, how bad did Ohio State look against Michigan, right? It's not like
we're gonna be so far removed by that by the time this nice, fun slate goes through on Saturday, right? Once all the dust is settled there, I think Ohio State, what actually occurred on the field last Saturday against Michigan is going to be in distant rearview mirror, and that everyone's going to be more or less prepared to think about Ohio State through the prism of their resume, and less so what occurred in the third and fourth quarters of the Michigan game.
I think Ohio State's kind of looked blah, though, right? Like they didn't look. I mean, Northwestern was weather related, whatever. That's fine. But like a bunch of other games, they've looked very average.
Do you think the committee cares, or do they just want to put Ohio State in?
I think they'd love to put Ohio State in for sure.
Yeah.
I just think the committee's probably like, come on, like we just needed a little bit more out of you to make this happen. But this is too much of a stretch now, like they can't get away with it. But
it's 2 1-loss teams. I think they can and will get away with it.
Well, then you're penalizing TCU for playing an extra game. Like that feels like
they've been fun doing that in the past. I feel like.
Well, didn't TCU get screwed like the first playoff by Ohio State making it in?
Yeah, but there was no Big 12 title game that year.
Yeah. So there's precedence for a Big 12 champ or a Big 12 team to get jumped by Ohio State, because Baylor was in the same situation too, right? Didn't they get jumped? But
right.
Do you think there's any shot LSU beats Georgia? There's none, right?
No. I was trying to think about, so this slate is so fun, and just from a DFS perspective, even though I never win on it ever. I don't know. It's like I'm so ready for the reset of DFS for bowl purposes, but I always end up playing the slate just because it's an all-day slate. It's super fun, but I'm at a huge disadvantage just based on how I make lineups, and I know I'm going to end up lighting money on fire, but I'll make a bunch of cheap $1 lineups just to kind of scratch the itch and go from there. But how do you do historically on the slate? Do I?
It's all the same, like I play a bunch of lineups, and I have to have one lineup hit big, or I just either like win or lose $200. Like it's either I win $3,000 or $200 or lose $200. Like it just doesn't ever. These are interesting slates. The
pricing's always really good on this. Like it's I always feel like it's tight on the slate.
This one's really good. I think Fridays is bad. Fridays is
bad.
It's awful. But Saturdays is fun, and I think there's a lot of options. It's like they put everybody around the same price. Yeah. Like if you look at running backs on Saturday, like everybody is 6 to 7K, and all of them are good options. So it's almost like, okay, which one of these do you want? Which I think is good, which is appealing. But the MAC game always scares me in a slate like this.
Can I get your opinion on? So I've been starting to just try to abstractly think about what direction I want to take. And do you think Haener and AOC will be low owned, and are they potentially good contrarian plays or just bad plays?
I think AOC is a bad play and will be loaned. I think Haener will be low owned, but I think I can see a route to him being good. Like,
is Michigan's pass D that good?
I mean, their overarching defense is very good. They gave up a bunch of yards and stuff to Ohio State, but it's Ohio State, count,
Yeah. But he's 5,700, and he's going to throw it 50 times.
Yeah, but he's got one receiver.
And Durham.
When you're Ohio State, you have 3 to 4 legitimate options.
Yeah,
right? Fleming is a legitimate option.
State data point
I know, but
Michigan State's pass D.
So looking at Purdue, their team total was like 17, and they just don't have a lot of like. What is Michigan defensively worried about? Devin Maccabee, like they're not going to be pounding 8 in the box because they're so worried about Maccabee, right? So then you have more guys in coverage. So I don't know. I personally would not. I don't think I'm touching that Purdue offense. I'd rather. There's a bunch of other ones, right? I'd rather look at Fresno State against Boise State.
Yeah.
Better total. I think there's that perception that Boise State's defense is awesome, but
right. I was thinking that too.
Cooper Lagat got real hot in that second half. Didn't he? I mean, the guy all of a sudden was throwing bombs.
They turned it on in the second and third quarters. It was good.
He used his legs a little bit. By the way, what is his haircut? His hair just flows out the back, and it's not like it doesn't have any like in East Cobb, Atlanta, we'd call that like wings, like the preppy white boy wings, where the hair flips up. It doesn't do that. It's just like real. It looks like real straight and scraggly and just straight down. It's very interesting look. He's kind of like he's rocking a mullet almost. That's my takeaway from that game.
He's the man.
You know what game kind of stinks is this Clemson North Carolina game. I think both teams are like super struggling. Drake May's been awful or to bad in the last couple of weeks. Like DJU is DJU, but Clemson's got amazing defense.
Aren't you afraid of fading it too at the same time? Like both teams have been terrible offensively, but DJU against that defense and Shipley against that defense, and then like what if the North Carolina offense just plays like it did the first 11 weeks of the year? Then it's like scary to fade them as well. But if things just continue in the same direction that they have been, those teams have been awful.
Yeah,
I don't know what to do with it.
I'm scared at this current point. Anytime I have to use a lot of DJU, I'm very scared. But I think he's a legitimate option against North Carolina. On the other side, too, you're right. Like the matchup is tough, although Clemson's not as tough as they used to be defensively. They're still very good. But North Carolina's got like the best potential upside of an offense on the slate, conceivably, right? So like, how do you not do that? So I don't know. I think those are two struggling teams that are fake good. I like to call it fake good.
DJU even going to throw to? The one Collins is hurt. The other Collins just went in the portal. Antonio Williams catches 5 for 40 every game. That's not interesting. And so do you just stack DJU and Shipley together?
I don't ever stack DJU just because like none of the receivers are any good in my opinion. Yeah. Like you said, like Williams is maybe the most talented and he only goes for like 40 yards a game. I would just go naked and I wouldn't have a problem if both are in the same lineup because Shipley is good out of the backfield. But both of them are like very doable prices. Yeah, he's super cheap. It came out of nowhere. It's CJ Harris, the Ohio quarterback. Did you watch that action?
Yeah. I was looking so good in that one, but I didn't have him in Wiggles, and all of a sudden all my lineups that were near the top were at the bottom after he started going off in like the late second quarter. So I stopped watching at that point.
Yeah, he was pretty good. I mean, like it wasn't below you away numbers. Like the passing obviously wasn't, but he was like 12 for 60 and 3 rushing touchdowns, which is nice. He's super cheap. Nothing is probably more scarier than the Toledo quarterback situation. Last weekend, I saw that Finn was playing, so I put him in like 20% of my lineups, and then like immediately regretted it. Did you watch our Lord and Savior? I didn't watch the
game. He got hurt, right?
He was hurt the whole time. He looked awful, like legitimately awful. If you told me he was concussed, I would have believed it. Like every pass was bad, every run was nowhere. He was making bad decisions. Everything was late. So, and then on the other side of it, you got Tucker Gleason running the football, ball in his left hand, which also he had surgery on 2 weeks ago. So I can't, by the way, that just shows you how different those guys are than us. Like Tucker Gleason had hand surgery to repair a broken bone 2 weeks ago and played. I threw my back out and I'm 34 picking up groceries and I haven't worked out since. Like what a different world we both, Gleason and I live in.
I know, man. It's unfair. So, Gleason's from you. He transferred in from your neck of the woods, right?
Really?
He said he went to Georgia Tech originally.
I thought he was, for some reason, I thought he was a true freshman, but
I think he's like a third-year freshman at this point.
I love that.
Yeah, it's great.
Speaking of transfers, what kind of portal news have you been loving? What's like the one or two guys that have piqued your most interest?
I feel like so many of the guys that were going early to mid rounds in our best balls and just didn't see the field are now winding up in the portal, which is validating to some degree, right? It makes you think, oh, we were like, it wasn't just us imagining that these guys have expectations surrounding them and talent about them, right? It didn't work out this year, and now they want to actually see it work out in the future. So it's not like we just imagined that these guys had potential. That potential just wasn't realized this year and now. So Byron Cardwell, for instance, right? Like whatever happened, I don't know if it was a benching or what, but he's not satisfied with not seeing the field whatsoever at Oregon and wants to go try and make something better of it. Did you see Sean Tyler just went to the portal?
Sean Tyler, Kyron Drones as well.
Did he?
Yep. We have some interesting names. Some I don't think Sean Tyler fits this mold, but like Drones and Malik Hornsby are these like guys that are like, they could totally blow up the CFF world, or they could complete 40% of passes and be done by week 3 next season. I think there's some intriguing options for sure. What about your boy Davis Brin?
I think Kenny ends up getting the Tulsa job, and he just goes back from the portal and goes back to Tulsa and then throws for 50 touchdowns next year.
Kenny is from a smaller school, right? FCS?
Kenny is at Incarnate Word.
Oh, yeah. FCS.
So he took over for he took over that, like, I guess it was probably like a ready-made package surrounding what Cameron Ward did last year, right? So Ward and Eric Morris go to Washington State. Kenny comes in. I don't know have you been seeing on Twitter like the name Lindsey Scott? You familiar?
I don't think so, no.
Really? So he's like a 7th-year senior quarterback. He started out I think he's been at Missouri, LSU, definitely at least one of those two. And now he's at Incarnate Word, and he threw for 50 scores for Kenny this year. So I don't know how much of that is Kenny's doing versus like plug and play of the previous regime, just kind of, but whatever. But I mean, depending on what Tulsa's looking for, right? How fun would that be to just bring a guy that engineered that offense last year over, get Brin back out of the portal, and then let's go. Brin, dude, I'm sure you remember, it wasn't that long ago. How good was Brin looking before he busted up his shoulder this past year? It was happening. Like it was at the point where he was a priority play against Ole Miss in like week 4 in CFF.
He had I think he had like 12 touchdowns in like the first 4 games, and he ended with 17. But you're right. I think it was the shoulder. I mean, who knows? I mean, you got to think that continuing on with that conference, there's a lot of points scored and he's fine, but he just completely got stopped by that injury, and then Braxton, and then the splitting, and this was bad. Yeah,
I chalk it up to the injury, but that's what I think happens with him. He's coming back home, back to QB, the GJ Kinney offense.
That guy, I just looked it up, had 50 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. Like 5 Lindsey Scott, he's like 5'11", 210. I think Davis Brin was probably the perfect example of like, guys, it's day 1 of off season. Like, let's not overhype and get too crazy about where Davis Brin could go. And I think we see that a little bit more with these like FCS guys that like do great, put up insane numbers, and then people are like, oh, this would be a great guy for. So it's kind of reminds me of like Cody Schrader. Do you think FCS guys are going to have any, like, generally speaking, maybe, because we don't know that much about any of them really? Do you think there's going to be 1 or 2 that could pop up and be like actually very good in G5 or Power 5 teams? Or is it just kind of like a...
So I think, me personally, one of the things that I want to do this offseason is come up with a better decision tree and process surrounding transfers in general. If I haven't done it exhaustively, but just thinking off the top of my head, looking back at the transfers I drafted this year and how it played out, they were all terrible. So I don't know. I don't know if I need better criteria for trying to figure out when a transfer is more likely to hit or what, but the idea that it's plug and play just because it's so prominent probably isn't valid way to factor that into for strategic purposes. So in terms of FCS, so Cody Schrader ended up being way better than I thought he would be. I thought he would just be a flash in the pan, and it's not to say he was amazing, but he was
playable.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, good for him. That's awesome. The name from the FCS ranks that stood out to me was that dude from Austin P. Dre McCray.
So I was thinking, Dre McCray. Yeah,
he's legit, right? He was on one of the slates this year.
He was on the week 0 slate, and he played really well. I think he's probably the most likely, like that type, right? Like a very productive receiver, like a gadgety a little bit because he's not the biggest of guys, but he'd
Yeah.
have to go G5.
Yeah, most likely. That could be fun.
Yeah, I'm curious to see where these guys go too. Like, does he get a big head and try to? He's from Tallahassee. Does he try to go to FSU, or does he just kind of say, you know what, like maybe I can just crush it at Arkansas State? You know, like how high of these sites are we going to see from these guys? But I had an idea, a thought. Oh, I wanted to circle back to the running backs. I was thinking about that this morning because I had tweeted it out, and I want your answer here in a minute. You know, who was your biggest miss of the offseason? And I thought about all the running backs that I had drafted or saw drafted that did nothing, like Tay McWilliams, Christopher Brooks, Kamar Wheaton, all those guys, Brandon Campbell, like all those guys, a lot of transfers included. And I'm wondering, like, Nathaniel Pete was a good example of like these are all running backs that like haven't won the job, and we fought over which one would be the right one, and like none of them are the right one.
So
Do you
you
think
and
that's
I
like
did
going
a
to be a common
show,
theme, or
our first you and me show. I think we called out, or I called out why I hate pretty much everyone you mentioned. And even still, all the running backs that I drafted early sucked for different reasons. Tavion Thomas, I have had way too much of him. What's his name? Braden Bennett, that worked out really well. So running back largely across the board, the early ones that I was grabbing as often as I could. I guess Charbonnet worked out well, but and I got a decent amount of Dwayne McBride, but largely that was towards like the tail end of draft season. But running back, generally speaking, I didn't draft enough in quantity, and the fact that the ones that I drafted more often when I had the chance to not working out just kind of torpedoed so many of my teams.
yeah, it's like you not only did you not nail it, you also didn't have a lot of them to
Right.
back it up. Maybe
Yeah.
that's something to think about is like when you're taking these types of players, like get you an extra one or two. In terms of running backs for me, I named a bunch, McWilliams and Brooks were guys that I was taking everywhere. But I did hit on two of them really nicely. I was very proud of. I had a ton of Blake Corum and I had a ton of Travis Dye. And I thought Dye was like the most obvious. Like, why would you not want a USC running back with Lincoln Riley? But who was your biggest miss? I listed mine was Brennan Armstrong, and then also said Tay McWilliams. Was not a guy I was like banging the drum on. I wasn't like tweeting all about him. I had a couple tweets out there, but like I have him in a ton of drafts, so I counted him. So what about you?
Generally, I reserve content like this for brandonchicken.com. But I guess doing one by each position or a couple by each position. Evan Prater and Chandler Morris. I was so maybe it's just stubbornness more than anything else, but I was so beholden to the sentiment that I don't want to handcuff in best ball through the lens of we only get 20, 25, 30 maybe rounds of picks. So much is going to inherently go wrong that's outside of our control to begin with, whether it be injuries, players transferring, players just not winning starting jobs, suspensions. Why do I need to light one of my 20, 25, 30 picks on fire through a handcuffing process? The results did not bear that out as a good strategy. It would have been nice to handcuff Morris with Max Duggan. I have an awesome way. I need to go for a long run at some point and get my get a runner's high to actually write my end of season write up for Kyle's burner site. But I have the most awesome lead in to talk about it once I actually do. It's like all theorized up in my head. But that for quarterbacks, those two are pretty good starters. Running back, I mean, Braden Bennett's the obvious one. That so much of that feels like it's just what was I supposed to do? I asked Chadwell, hey, is there any chance that your all world track athlete, superstar running back that's ready to break the F out is going to just be week to week for the first 11 weeks of the season and you're not going to announce it? Because I would like to know that anytime between April and September. And then receivers, I took so many transfer receivers. Tyler Harrell, that was really fun. Tyrone Tracy. I had some Brock Thompson, Jalen Robinson.
Do you have any Miles Price?
Oh, way too much. That was a disaster.
That was a disaster.
Yeah.
Everybody was in on that though. Like that's one that we can all sit back and just chuckle and be like, "What the hell were we thinking?" You know who I had a ton of receiver wise? Mac Hippenhammer.
It didn't. I guess it was pretty bad, right?
It wasn't the best. He started off well. He had 3 great games, and then he ended with 3 great games. But
you can blame Gabbert's injury for that, though.
Yeah, that was brutal. You know what I've thought about this too with Brew McCoy. I was so dumb because I had a great. By the way, he ended with a pretty decent season. 48 catches, 600 yards. I mean, he got lucky by health with Tillman, but like that's kind of the name of the game. Right? Like,
it's a feather in your cap. That's a win.
I would say that I was dumb about it though because I was so convinced that the second receiver for Tennessee would be a great play. And so what I should have done when I didn't draft Brew McCoy would be draft Jalen Hyatt, but I never did. I had like 2 of them out of like 20.
Yeah.
What a dumb move. It was so dumb. I had it right. The process was right. And I just did not think that I could be wrong or that Brew would be more of a 3 than a 2, but whatever. So it's always fun to look back on it. And I tweeted it out just because and I started it because everybody got something wrong, right? Like the funny thing is too, that I think the 2 of us, we could name everybody in the industry and be like, this is who he got wrong. This is who he got wrong. This is, like each of them, just because we all had those guys and everybody missed like 20 of them. So,
I assume you've taken note that Clint Carlson took down the Champion Series, right? He does probably. I don't know if it's the result of just the way that he lives his life and being in Canada or whatever. Sorry for doxing you, Clint. But he does the best job, I feel like, of protecting himself from the echo chamber of any of us. Like he's in. I don't know why, but he's in our Burning the Red Shirt Discord. He's not in the CFF site one. He doesn't do that many drafts, and his engagement on Twitter is basically just tweeting out his own thoughtful insights. So everything he's doing, I feel like, is just a result of his own research, which it is I think the best way of going about things when you're trying to navigate the CFF landscape, but it's also not as much fun. It's more fun to interact with people. It's more fun to partake in things that are not boring, like mock drafts and such throughout the offseason. It's more fun to be in Discords where Mike is posting news every 5 seconds, right? But from a strategic perspective, I think that is like the best way of kind of trying to ensure that the things that you truly believe in and the conclusions that you have personally come to write themselves into your actual your draft process.
If you do the research, that works, right?
Yeah,
like if you pay attention this season, go into the off season and do research and read and stuff like that, it definitely works. But it's like you said, you lose that on the fun of the battle, the debate of who's going to be good or not, and all that stuff. I mean, that's what kind of gets us by for like 8 months of the year. When do you foresee yourself doing your first mock draft next offseason?
Is this a lead into that thing that you're roping me into?
No.
Oh, so you mean, so I don't know. I'm on the fence about what I want to do in terms of off season. In a lot of ways, I want to be more like Clint and just go in my own personal bunker. Obviously, that's not the best for our podcast enterprise, right? So maybe there's some give and take there, but I do feel like I overextended myself a little bit last year. I think there's something to be said about letting the market set itself and then taking advantage of that. I largely prioritize my own personal and financial well-being over the content that we're creating and our business and whatnot, right? So, and definitely over any of our customers is not the right word, but anyone who listens to our podcast, I definitely prioritize myself over any of them. But to
least you're
answer
honest.
the question, I don't know. I mean, I'd like to. I don't know. I'd like to kind of rethink about some of the things that I am doing off season wise this year. For at minimum, the reason of I was not that successful. I was with respect to like season long and best ball this year, and I think when you don't get the results that you want, you have to think about, okay, what do I need to do a little differently?
Well, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, Andrew. So I think what we need to do is just continue to do best balls starting in February. That's just my thought.
I mean, I know what's going to happen. I'm gonna throw down the die and be like, hey, I'm out. And then Greg is going to be like, oh, Champion Series starts up next week. And I'll be like, okay, where do I send the money?
Yeah. Well, I think what's interesting about the early stuff is like everybody is so scared to like overdraft a guy, I think, that like this value chart of everybody becomes so skewed. Like I'm trying to think of a guy that was getting drafted super late. Like
I got Trey Palmer in the last round of some of the early Champion Series.
Yeah. But then, like, if you think he's good, just draft him where you think he needs to be drafted. But those are all the interesting ones, are the early ones, because, you know, you feel like you get so scared. Like, I'm going to take EJ Smith. Is now too early, is now too late. What just happened? And then, like, you make the pick and you're like, okay, please don't have any Twitter notifications for the next 10 hours because that means it wasn't a shitty pick.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I don't know. Maybe we keep this episode a little short. What do you think? You got something you want to talk? I have one more thought idea, and this circles back more to real life. I have kind of I don't want to say hot take, but a warmer take. I think Georgia, their best matchup is Michigan. Like, I think of the teams remaining, TCU, Michigan, USC, Ohio State, the team that I think they would have the easiest time with or match up the best with is Michigan.
I don't know. Georgia's been so like that they haven't been good since the Tennessee game. Like I don't know what the first like 30% of the Georgia Tech game was this past weekend, but that was not the standard. Not to say that we can't just turn it up when we need to, as evidenced kind of by the Tennessee game, but there's been so many games this year where they've just been sleepwalking, and I feel like at some point that you sleepwalk, you're like when that's your MO, you're likely to sleepwalk a little too far into a game and it catches up to you and bites you. I don't know how TCU would do anything against them.
You think so?
Yeah.
I worry about like the explosive offenses, right? Like that's what I'm thinking for Georgia is you have to make big plays. You know, it's kind of like Michigan last week against Ohio State. That's not really their game. They just got put into that scenario because Ohio State just put everybody in the box and they just made a couple plays and all of a sudden they're up 3 touchdowns, right? I think teams like TCU and Ohio State and USC have that like offensive ability to put up 50 through the air. And I think Georgia just matches up well. Like offensive.
I want to see Georgia USC. I think that would be so fun.
I think that's what we're going to see. I think we'll see Michigan, TCU, and Georgia, USC, and
Georgia. Like, what do you think Georgia, USC just ends up being like when Alabama played Kyler in Oklahoma, where they all
probably.
Like the defense of USC is so bad that like the USC offense takes a few drives to ramp up, and all of a sudden it's 21-0, and USC can't get any stops, so the game's just over.
Yeah, I could see that happening 100%, right? Like they get behind 2-3 touchdowns and then they start scoring, but right. It's always 35-14, 42-28. Like they can never get that one stop to make it close. I think that's a good point. I think anytime you have a Heisman Trophy winner, you always have a shot against anybody. And I think they have so much offensive talent that it'll be there's a shot for them to keep it close. But I think you have to be a more well-rounded team to beat Georgia.
The idea of like them having so much offensive talent it's so frustrating, right? Because they even think about what they've neutered Jordan Addison. They've just boxed him into their wide receiver by committee bullshit, where he's not even on the field for all the snaps anymore, and he's not getting anything that's even representative of or close to representative of an alpha target share. It's disgusting.
Do you think he regrets going to USC?
Probably. Why? What has been good about it for him? I don't know what he prioritizes. Like, if he wanted to go and win and go to the playoff, then probably not, right? But it's not like the options were just stay at Pitt and go to USC. There were other options that,
like Alabama could have used him, I guess.
Yeah, he was looking at Texas, right?
Texas would have been the same thing, though. Probably, I think the right decision would have been Bama. And
maybe it's just because
they would have.
I loathe Brendan Rice because I think that he gets so many targets on that offense, and I'm convinced it's because he's of his last name and of his stature. He's not. He to me is like one of those receivers that it's never gonna click altogether on the field, and he makes 2 or 3 dumb plays a game, and he never gets penalized. They always put him back out there, and it usually ends up not mattering. But I don't know. Even outside of fantasy purposes, it's frustrating to just see USC running out 7-8 receivers a game.
It makes absolutely no sense. There's so much talent. Brendan Rice to me is hilarious because the way that their coaches and players on the sideline react when he catches a pass is just amazing. They're just like, holy shit, he caught a ball. Let's clap. Like, wave the towel. He actually caught. Yeah, it just is so weird to me. But yeah, I mean, Addison could have been used so much better. It would have been way more fun. And then he went there. He could have stayed at Pitt, and it probably would have been more fun to watch him play.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it just sucks. Did you see? You obviously saw because you're addicted to this like I am. But what are your thoughts on Trent Dilfer at UAB?
I think that's a joke, right?
I listened to a UAB podcast.
I mean, I think it's real, but I think it's a joke to hire him. I mean, he coaches like a private school, right?
Yeah, in Tennessee.
It's so ironic.
They were 3-19 in the 2 years before him, and he's turned them around to 32-10 the last 4 years or something like that. The idea, right, is that he's got all this track record with Elite 11. I assume there's some name cachet. One of the ideas is, hey, we're moving to the AAC. Like, he will be able to recruit at a ridiculous level relative to the competition because of his experience in the high school ranks, not just coaching, but like the Elite 11 stuff and all the connections he's made and stuff like that. And then also supposedly, this is just from like a UAB podcast I was listening to, like, money is not super important to him. So I'm interested to see what the contract terms look like because he has so much and made so much money throughout his career. So that like financial considerations probably positive as well for the school. The angle that came to me that I wonder how it plays out in reality is, so that the only bowl game that you can bet right now on FanDuel is the Bahamas Bowl, the UAB and Miami, Ohio. The spread, when I first saw it, was like 9 or 9.5. It's up to 10.5 now with UAB being favored. And this feels to me like either I'm trying to get out ahead of a mass exodus of UAB kids. Did you see that letter they wrote where they like threatened, basically saying like, if you don't hire the interim coach to full time, we're all out of here. So what if that happens? Like I assume Dwayne McBride is worth a point and a half on his own on the spread, and he's probably just declaring, right? We assume you've got him in in the spreadsheet. You've got him declaring. So I doubt he's playing in the bowl game. And what if other starters start to leave because they're so upset that UAB hired this supremely unqualified person to be their head coach instead of the person that they really liked and wanted to be head coach? What is that going to do to the line? We see this stuff happen every bowl season in terms of important players not playing and impacting the line a lot of times, not as much as it should, but then impacting the on-field result of the game paramountly. I don't know if that's a word, paramountly. But that's one of the things that I personally love about bowl season, how much the way that the game actually plays out does not represent what we saw throughout the duration of the season, because I think that is opportunity to take advantage of from an informational perspective. And this is the first example of it that I'm trying to take advantage of. Like, no way do I think that all things are, if this was just like a week 14, week 13 game, would I want to bet Miami, Ohio plus 10.5 against UAB, right? Like that doesn't make any sense, but we have a decent amount of time leading up to December 16th for a lot to happen. And even though Gabbert's gone, right, from Miami, Ohio, I still think that the amount of things that will happen for both of those teams leading up to that game, a lot more negative things are likely to happen to UAB than they are to Miami, Ohio. And that spread moving in favor of UAB right now. Like, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I at all am a smart team, what do you call it, spread betting person, because that's not how I like to make money most of the time. But I think bowl season does represent an opportunity to actually, for me to take advantage of some spread betting in this case representing one of those opportunities.
Well, I mean, McBride, if you talk to people that do the whole, betting and that's like their gig, I think they'd say that running backs don't matter. Like,
yeah, that's why I said like
speaking to the spread. I would say also regarding UAB, it's all fine and dandy. It's all cool to be like, yeah, if he's not hired, then we're out. Like the whole Rudy thing, put the jersey on the desk. But if you're like the third running back and the other two guys are like, we're out of here, it's like, well, maybe I get to play in the Bahamas Bowl and give myself a shot at like making the team, being the starter next year, or, maybe they can transfer based off of how they performed. So I don't know how much I believe that stuff, but I find it very ironic that people were like hating on Dilfer for that clip of him like pushing the high school kid. You remember? Have you seen that clip?
No, I haven't seen it.
Basically, a kid did something. He like disobeyed. I don't know. He was basically, Dilfer was disciplining him by like kind of pushing him and like obviously yelling at him. And what I find very ironic about it is we talked about it last week or the week before, that Michigan coach that's now the Charlotte coach. Like, I read that Athletic article about him. And they like praise him for doing the exact same thing. Like, the article is like, he did this to him, and now the kid listened to him forever and ever and loves him and blah, blah, blah. And it was very funny timing for me to read that and then see this hiring. But Mac typically stinks in bowl games, right? Like, I get the whole like,
do you not remember what the first bowl game of last year was?
I mean, it was the Bahamas Bowl, right?
Was it? I can't remember if it was that, but it was it. You know what? It must have been, because it's the same conferences. It was. I guess you're right. Yeah, because it was Middle Tennessee and Toledo was awful, and Middle Tennessee won. So your point is a good one. I thought relative to what I was going to make the point that the Mac showed up, but I was misremembering. Yeah, that's the idea, right? That the MAC isn't necessarily great in bowl games, so I get it. But I don't know. My hope here is general unrest and rebellion within the UAB program, and if I could help light that spark, if I could light that match in any way, I'm here for it. I'm here to do it.
Take down the UAB program yourself for a $50 Miami plus 10.5.
If I can reach out to some key personnel there, and we can have you seen Andor?
I don't think so.
You don't watch Star Wars stuff?
No.
All right.
I'm not a sci-fi guy.
That's fair.
I'm not a big reader. I'm not a big sci-fi guy. I'm not a big Marvel guy.
That's totally fair, but I'm happy to kind of write the manifesto for the UAB rebels and help them kickstart their their rebellion.
Are there two teams that you'd like to see matched up in the bowl game? Like, are there two offenses or two teams that would be like really fun to see?
I was looking. So it's funny. Yes, I was looking at yesterday at bowl projections, and I was curious to see who South Carolina was projected to get matched up with, because I've started to theorize as if my street cred couldn't go any more into the ground. The idea that Spencer Rattler could be the number 1 pick this year, based on the last 2 games, based on the idea that for the first 2 years of his college career, he was number 1 pick quality. He was the betting favorite, or he was the idea was he was going to be the first overall pick after his junior year for so long, right? So the tools are there. The sentiment was there. What more could he have possibly done the past 2 weeks to kind of revive that sentiment? So I'm trying to figure out if that's at all possible, because he's 100-1 right now on DraftKings, and I've started to light a little bit of money on fire on it. I'll probably do some more if I can get find anything at all that gives it a little bit of credence.
So, that, like in this draft, in the NFL draft,
yeah.
I mean, even if he was considered a first rounder, he's not topping Bryce Young, right? So that's pretty much
that's you don't think that people are considering Will Levis a top 5 pick, and he's never had
Anthony Richardson. So I'm not against Rattler as a first rounder, or I don't know.
All right, let's break it down a little bit. I have like 30 minutes to talk about this. No, does anyone have better tools than Rattler in the draft?
Well, I think tools are where like Caleb Williams and like
Caleb's not in this draft though.
Oh, right. I mean, I guess you could compare between Stroud and Young.
Stroud, in my opinion, is not comparable from a tools perspective, and
I think a tools perspective, it's probably close. You look at the toolsy raw guys like Levis and Richardson, right? Those are the toolsy guys.
Does Levis even have tools? I don't know. It isn't that hard to see Mahomes' tools in Rattler, in my opinion. Like we've talked about before, he has the same baseball type throw. So does Young. It is so aesthetically pleasing to watch them throw, because it's that baseball shortstop type throw. And that you can if you're trying to be one of those boomer NFL GMs, that they're looking for every reason to rip Young apart for being like 5'9" or whatever he is. So, and Rattler just put on tape 2 of the most absurd games possible that you could want from like a film perspective. So we've seen it play out in reality, and we know he's got the tools, and he's got the pedigree, and he's got the previous sentiment that just needs to be revived. I don't know. It's a dream to some degree, right? Probably to a large degree. But so anyway, let's backtrack. So I was curious to see who South Carolina is projected to play in a bowl game, because I was like, oh, all right, that it's being ramped up. The draft, the idea is being ramped up, but like, is he going to get like a nice runway in the way of a bowl game, or who's he projected to play? And I was like, mother effer. He's projected to play Illinois, which is like, oh, that is not a game script for like an absolute feast just putting on just destroying some middle of the pack defense. But
so you're looking for a tough opponent that he can destroy.
So what I'm looking for is, so there's 2 New Year's Day games that are projected SEC Big Ten. The one that the Rattlers are projected for right now is Illinois, South Carolina in the ReliaQuest Bowl, the Outback Bowl, if you will. And then there's the other one, I forget what it is, but it's LSU and Purdue. I want Purdue and South Carolina, because then we could get the Tennessee Purdue game from last year in the bowl game.
That would be fun.
For Rattler this year, and then Rattler goes number 1.
You never know because of off season and like guys just boom up for no reason. But I think you have it right. I think you need like a high scoring game that gets crazy. The only thing I would say is if he can get like a really good opponent, like a really good defense, to then like he did it against Clemson, now he's doing it against another really good defense. Your only way to number 1 is if he goes crazy and he does it against a respected team. Is my thought.
I don't know if people think about it that way. You're not. I'm not saying you're wrong. I just have no idea. Like, what do you think is, if you had to pick, would you rather, if you could pick for South Carolina, would you rather set him up against Illinois or against Purdue, in terms of like, okay, I'm trying to set him up for the best path to number one?
It's got to be Purdue.
Yeah, I think so too.
Illinois screams like 21-14, like slow,
couple picks,
or because Chase Brown probably not going to play, or let's say he doesn't play. Like, how good is Illinois offensively then? And then all of a sudden it's 35-3, and Juju McDowell has 3 touchdowns. Oh, it is for sure. But I'm wondering, where's the path to, you need a tight game that's not slow, and I think Illinois is the one you would want to avoid there for sure, between the two.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's one that screams out at me. I just typically like to see the most random of teams play each other. Like, give me like Air Force, Penn State type stuff. Like, has this team ever played each other before? Like, just like complete opposite styles of offense. And I'm trying to think of like the specific teams I like to watch. I don't know. We'll see. I think a variety. I hate repeat matchups is a bummer. Like, how many times do we need to see Wisconsin play Georgia type situations in the Outback Bowl? But I'd like to avoid that.
I'm pretty bummed that our Christmas Eve Bowl, we have to deal with San Diego State. Like, I don't want to see.
Are they locked into the Hawaii Bowl? I
know.
See, that's the opposite of what I want for a Hawaii Bowl.
Yeah. They're playing Middle Tennessee. They're playing Middle Tennessee, I think. So it could, like, Jalen Mayden's been kind of fun. They just score. Didn't they just score 0 points in their last game or something? Though, didn't they get shut out? Like, I don't know. That's not really what we're looking for in that ball game, though. We're looking for an over/under of like 64, and both teams kind of just basketball on grass type deal.
Yep. Yeah, that's the only other one that's determined, it seems like. Yeah. Well, I think we'll have fun with it on Sunday. There's 50 million bowls. Real quick, thoughts on 5 and 7 teams getting into a bowl game? Did you see that? There's not enough qualified teams to make bowl games, so a couple of 5 and 7 teams.
Dude, I'm here for it. What I don't want to have happen is,
when I tell you the teams that are like priority of who would get it, you're not going to be here for it. It's Michigan State, Auburn, Georgia Tech are 3 of the top ones that would be in consideration.
Yeah, but the alternative is the bowl game doesn't happen, which
that's
is like
true.
That's a real thing that gets discussed, right? That they invent bowls sometimes out of nowhere when they need to, because more teams qualified, but they also would get rid of them if not enough teams were possible for a bowl game. So we can't have that. We need all the games that we can get. So if we have to deal with like one of those teams in a bowl game, it's fine. I'll live with it.
I would prefer not Michigan State, I think. Auburn would be bad too, because they have Tank's not playing that game. Tank's not playing a 5 and 7 bowl game.
And Freeze isn't going to actually coach, so it's exciting. The idea of seeing Robbie Ashford in Freeze offense is very exciting, but it's not. We're not going to see it.
Do you think he's a good fit for that offense? I think he's not a good enough thrower. I think he needs to be a little bit better thrower. I don't understand
what a Hugh Freeze offense is anymore after this past year with whatever they were doing at Liberty, like just not allowing Salter to do anything cool. And like the only time the offense seemed to work really was Jonathan Bennett. That dude has been around subbing into games for Malik Willis and for forever, and he's always been god awful. And now he went through like a month stretch where he was like leading them against upsets against quality teams. But I don't know. I don't really understand what the Freeze offense is supposed to be anymore after the season. It was a super weird year, but still, Ashford's got skills, so it could be fun.
He's a great runner. I mean, I'm curious if he goes to the portal.
Yeah.
I don't think, like, if you were to get Malik Hornsby, it feels like the same exact thing, right? Like, except Malik's a better runner, but I think he's also a worse passer, probably, right?
Yeah, he can't throw, but I'm fine with that at the G5 level.
Jeff Sims. You think
Oh,
Jeff Sims could be in a Hugh Freeze offense? I mean, I did find it funny that Hugh Freeze took a reject Auburn quarterback and made him, what he was.
Yeah.
Always fun to think about. But
getting back to the bowl game itself, do you remember when it was Dykes? So it was the year that Dykes got hired to SMU. He got hired in bowl season, but then didn't coach the bowl game, but kind of chilled on the sideline. And they let Ben Hicks be the OC in addition to being the quarterback. Do you remember this?
That was the Hawaii Bowl, wasn't it?
No, I don't think so. Maybe you're right, but I mean, it was a disaster. They lost by like 30 points. But that's the kind of stuff that is always fun about bowl season, right? That there's all the impacts of the turnover that we see at the coaching ranks and at the player level, and how that bears out on the field. That's one of the things that I love most.
I will tell you a game that I remember that just was absolute batshit crazy was that UNC Baylor game.
Oh my God.
Where one of the running backs ran for like 300 and he hit 1,000 yards like on the dot.
Johnny Jefferson. So that game needs to be. I think about it all the time because I got it pretty wrong from a DFS perspective, and I just remember that slate being so fun. Like me and my buddies, we like to try and like go out in New York City and near the end of the year and just get fired up. Like bowl games are on; it's always a fun time. If you catch like one of those like all day / night slates in the middle of the week. So we were out for that game, and while some other games were going on too, it was great. But I think about that game all the time from the perspective of that game needs to be the playbook for if you're down your quarterback, like this is what you need to do with your offense. Like they were down Seth Russell and the other kid, Chris, what was his name? Chris Johnson. He played, but he like barely played. Like they played him for like 20% of the snaps, and then they were just doing wild shit on the field. But yeah, that game was incredible.
With that's what happened with the LSU Kansas State bowl game last year. Remember, all the quarterbacks were out, and then it was this John Trey Kirkland receiver.
Yeah.
So I found that game you were talking about, SMU. You were correct. It's the Frisco Bowl. This is 2017, I think. A couple good names in here. One throwback name, which we all thought would be like this superstar CFF player, Jamar Smith, played in that game. Remember him?
Oh, Mike's boy.
Boston Scott was the running back, the now Eagles running back. And then Cortland Sutton was on the other team. And it was a 51-10 Louisiana Tech win. So did not work out well for him. But yeah, I think you're right. Like, I think that's like just a straight, this is what you do. You don't have a quarterback anymore. You go shotgun. You do some motion. You have a guy next to you, and you just make it happen. You just do wildcat the entire time. But, well, we're looking forward to Sunday night. We'll make sure everybody's aware and knows what's going on with it, and we'll chat about the bowl games as they come on. And hope you guys enjoyed today and enjoy the championship game weekend. See you guys.